My mom demanded that I cancel my entire wedding just to spare my golden child sister's fragile feelings, so I uninvited my whole family, and the way I flipped the script on them at the last minute left everyone in shock, completely speechless. I'm Emily, 30 years old, and my fiancé, Ryan, who is 31, proposed to me this past March. We've been a couple for 6 years now. He truly is my closest companion, my partner, and without a doubt, the most supportive individual I've ever known. When he knelt down and asked me to marry him, it genuinely felt as though everything in my life had finally aligned. However, the moment I shared our wonderful news, my mother and my half-sister, Cassie, who is 24, decided to transform my engagement and subsequent wedding into their personal battleground. My mother married my stepfather, Tom, when I was 5. Cassie is their daughter, and despite growing up under the same roof, our relationship has always been more akin to distant acquaintances who merely tolerate each other, rather than genuine sisters. The truth is, Cassie has always harbored a strange competitive streak when it comes to me. It began in our childhood. She would throw a tantrum if I achieved a better grade or if one of our relatives offered me a compliment. As we matured, the stakes only escalated. I pursued higher education on a scholarship, while Cassie chose not to attend college at all. I've been in a committed relationship with Ryan for years, whereas she has drifted from one tumultuous relationship to another. Now that I'm engaged, she's behaving as though my happiness is some sort of personal vendetta against her. Anyway, Ryan proposed last March during a peaceful weekend at home, and we settled on a January wedding date. Our vision was for something modest and intimate, a cozy ceremony with approximately 70 guests. It felt perfectly suited for us. I was incredibly eager to begin the planning, and I assumed my family would share my enthusiasm. Oh, how mistaken I was. When I telephoned my mother to share the news, her initial reaction wasn't joy. Instead, she said, "Oh, Cassie isn't going to like this." I chuckled a little, thinking she was jesting, but she was entirely serious. Apparently, my engagement was destined to upset Cassie. Why? Because she was currently unattached and trying to navigate her life. I initially dismissed it as an odd remark, but then, a few weeks later, Cassie announced her own impending marriage to a man she had been seeing for only 3 months. Now, I generally try not to pass judgment on other people's decisions, but this felt peculiar. Cassie has always been impulsive, but getting married after 3 months to someone none of us were acquainted with simply didn't feel right to me. Nevertheless, I remained silent. I reasoned it was her life, her choice, and not my concern. Fast forward to July. Cassie's whirlwind marriage dissolved just as rapidly as it began. Her husband, Jake, cheated on her with her closest friend, no less, merely 2 months after their wedding. She initiated divorce proceedings. The entire situation was messy and heartbreaking, and I genuinely sympathized with her. I attempted to offer my support, but each time I reached out, I was met with a cold reception. It felt as though she was angry with me, but I couldn't comprehend why. Then, it dawned on me. She didn't desire my support. She wanted to place the blame on me. From what I've managed to piece together, Cassie believes I somehow instigated her hasty marriage. As if my engagement announcement was a challenge she felt compelled to win. And when her marriage crumbled, I suppose she decided it was simpler to resent me than to accept responsibility for her own choices. By the time autumn arrived, tensions were high. Cassie and I hadn't truly communicated since her divorce, and my mother was behaving strangely. Every time I mentioned wedding preparations, she would become quiet or shift the topic. It seemed she was avoiding the subject, but I didn't press her. I assumed she simply didn't wish to discuss weddings due to Cassie's circumstances. I should have recognized the warning signs. Let me tell you, nothing can prepare you for the sheer absurdity of being made to feel guilty about your own wedding. I imagined wedding planning would be stressful due to logistical issues or budget constraints, not because my own family would transform it into some twisted contest. Yet here we were. So, it was mid-November, and Ryan and I had just dispatched our wedding invitations. I was incredibly excited, finally feeling as though everything was falling into place. That sense of elation was short-lived, because 2 days later, I received the call. It was my mother. I recall thinking it was a bit unusual, as she rarely calls me. She's more of a monthly text message type of person. But I answered, assuming she might wish to chat about the wedding. I should have known better. The conversation began innocently enough. She inquired about my well-being and Ryan's, and then casually inserted, "So, you're really going through with the wedding?" Initially, I thought she was simply confirming the date or something similar. Yes, of course, everything's arranged. We've booked the venue, caterer, flowers, most of it's already paid for. That's when she sighed. Not a typical sigh, but a loud, exaggerated, dramatic sigh that practically screamed, "You're about to ruin someone's life." "Well," she began, elongating the word as though she were about to impart some profound wisdom. I've been thinking about Cassie, and I truly believe you should reconsider. I paused, genuinely bewildered. Reconsider what? She hesitated, as if preparing for a lengthy monologue. I just don't think it's a good time for a wedding, Emily. Cassie's still so heartbroken from the divorce. Having a grand celebration like this so soon after everything she's endured, it feels a little insensitive. I honestly thought I had misheard her. Wait, you think I should cancel my wedding for Cassie? Well, yes, she replied, as if it were the most logical request imaginable. She's been through so much, and seeing you get married so soon after her divorce is going to cause her a great deal of pain. I was speechless. I didn't even know how to formulate a response. Mom, we've been planning this wedding for almost a year. The venue's booked, the deposits are paid. How can you ask me to simply cancel it? She didn't miss a beat. You could always do something small, a church ceremony perhaps, with just immediate family. That way you still get married, but it's not such a grand production. You wouldn't be flaunting it. Flaunting it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, this isn't about flaunting anything. It's about celebrating my relationship with Ryan. We've been together for 6 years. This is our day. She sighed again, heavier this time. I just think if you truly loved your sister, you would do this for her. She needs time to heal, and a large wedding is only going to make things worse for her. At this point, I was furious, but I attempted to remain composed. Mom, I understand that Cassie is going through a difficult period, but this has absolutely nothing to do with her. Ryan and I have been planning this for so long. It's not fair to ask us to alter everything because of her choices. She disliked that. Her choices, Emily? She didn't choose to have her husband cheat on her. She didn't choose to have her life fall apart. Yes, but she did choose to marry a man she barely knew after 3 months. That was the wrong thing to say. My mother completely lost her temper, accusing me of being cruel and selfish, of not comprehending what Cassie had experienced. She even resorted to a classic. I thought I raised you better than this. At that juncture, I couldn't endure it anymore. Mom, I am not canceling my wedding. End of discussion. I ended the call, trembling with anger. I immediately telephoned Ryan and recounted everything. He was just as bewildered as I was. Who asks their own daughter to cancel her wedding for someone else's divorce? He remarked. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Over the subsequent weeks, my mother intensified her campaign to guilt me into canceling or reducing the scale of the wedding. She would call me every few days, always with some variation of the same argument. Cassie's heartbroken. You're being insensitive. A small wedding would mean so much to the family. At one point, she even attempted to involve Ryan. She called him directly, saying, "You're such a thoughtful person, Ryan. I know you'll understand why this is important for Cassie." Fortunately, he immediately shut that down, informing her we were adhering to our original plans. But then Cassie became involved. She began sending me text messages, making passive-aggressive remarks like, "It must be wonderful to have everything go perfectly for you. And don't you think it's a little soon for a big celebration?" She even brought up the date, stating, "January feels like such an odd time for a wedding. Are you sure you didn't choose it to rub it in my face?" Rub it in her face? I couldn't believe the audacity. I tried ignoring her at first, but she simply continued to escalate. She started calling me, leaving lengthy, guilt-inducing voicemails about how difficult it was for her to even contemplate weddings and how my insensitivity was hindering her healing process. The most frustrating part was how my mother and Cassie seemed to reinforce each other. My mother would call and say something like, "Cassie was weeping all night thinking about your wedding." And then Cassie would text me the following day saying, "Mom is so upset about how you're handling this." It was utterly draining. I was at my breaking point. I couldn't fathom the lengths they were willing to go to make my wedding about them. I knew I had to establish a boundary, but I wasn't yet certain how. This was the moment I truly grasped the toxicity of their behavior. This wasn't about Cassie's divorce or her emotions. It was about control. They desired me to put my life on hold to accommodate their insecurities, and I was no longer willing to let them dictate my happiness. By December, circumstances had truly spiraled out of control. Cassie was no longer content to privately sulk or send me passive-aggressive texts. She was now on a mission to tarnish my reputation with anyone who would listen, and frankly, I was experiencing whiplash trying to keep pace with all her antics. It began subtly. I learned from my cousin Megan, bless her for being the family informant, that Cassie had been contacting relatives to caution them about me. According to her, I was flaunting my wedding in her face to humiliate her. She even asserted that I had deliberately chosen January, knowing it would be too soon after her divorce for her to emotionally manage it. I couldn't grasp the reasoning. My engagement had been set months before she even married, let alone divorced. How on earth was I supposed to foresee her life falling apart when I was sending out save the dates? But logic seems to hold little importance when someone is determined to play the victim. Her stories grew more dramatic with each retelling. Megan informed me Cassie was uttering things like, "Emily always believes she's superior to me. She's just parading her perfect little life in my face because she knows I'm struggling." The worst aspect was that some family members actually bought into her narrative. My mother, of course, was her staunchest supporter. She began telephoning me almost daily to inquire if I had reconsidered canceling or scaling back the wedding. "Cassie's still so fragile," she would say. "She cried all night after seeing your wedding invitations. You truly don't require a grand event. Can't you just do something simple?" I remained resolute every single time, but it was exhausting. The true breaking point occurred at a family gathering on Christmas. Ryan and I had been invited to a dinner at my aunt's residence, and I believed it would be a pleasant way to unwind after all the wedding-related stress. Of course, Cassie and my mother were also present, which should have been my initial warning sign. Things were tense from the outset. Cassie barely acknowledged me, but every time I mentioned the wedding, she would huff or roll her eyes. At one point, I was conversing with my aunt about flowers, and Cassie loudly mumbled, "It must be nice to squander so much money on a party when some individuals can barely piece their lives back together." I ignored her, but it was evident she desired a reaction. Eventually, the conversation shifted, and I began to relax a little. That is, until Cassie suddenly burst into tears in the middle of the living room. She was fully sobbing, shaking her head and muttering, "I cannot believe how cruel people can be." Everyone froze. My aunt rushed over to console her, asking what was amiss. That's when Cassie launched into her performance. "It's just so difficult," she said through her tears. "I've been through so much this year, and now I have to sit here and listen to Emily discuss her perfect wedding as if nothing else matters. She knows how much pain I'm experiencing, but she doesn't care." And my mother immediately interjected, stroking Cassie's back as if she were the victim of some terrible injustice. "She's right, Emily. You need to be more considerate. You have no idea how hard this has been for her." That's when I lost my composure. I had been biting my tongue for weeks, but I could no longer tolerate it. "This wedding has nothing to do with Cassie," I stated, attempting to remain calm. "Ryan and I have been planning this for a year. If she's upset, that's not my fault. Perhaps she should take some responsibility for rushing into a bad marriage instead of blaming me for her problems." The room fell into complete silence. My aunt looked as though she wished to vanish into the sofa, and Cassie's tears instantly transformed into fury. "How dare you," she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to have your life fall apart. You've had everything handed to you. Your scholarship, your boyfriend, your perfect little life. You've never had to struggle for anything." I stood up, trembling with anger. "You're right, Cassie. I don't know what it's like to have my life fall apart. But that's because I don't make impulsive decisions just to compete with other people. Perhaps if you spent less time being resentful and more time working on yourself, you wouldn't be in this situation." At that moment, Ryan took my hand and said, "We're leaving." I didn't object. On the drive home, I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, second-guessing whether I had been too harsh. But the more I considered it, the more I realized I had every right to defend myself. Cassie had been provoking me for weeks, and I was no longer willing to let her turn my wedding into her self-pity party. What truly resonated with me, however, was how my mother had immediately sprung to Cassie's defense without hesitation. Not once did she attempt to comprehend my perspective or even acknowledge the immense stress this entire situation was causing me. It felt as though she had chosen her favorite, and it wasn't me. The following day, I received a text message from my mother. "You owe your sister an apology for what you said last night. She's been through so much, and you were unnecessarily cruel." I did not respond. I was finished apologizing for things that were not my fault. By this point, it was evident that Cassie was not going to back down, and my mother was not going to cease enabling her. I did not know what their next move would be, but I knew I had to begin preparing for the worst. Update 1. Hello again, and thank you so much for your comments and support on my previous post. Your advice genuinely assisted me. So, after the catastrophe at the family dinner, I understood I had to establish a firm boundary. Cassie and my mother were not merely being unreasonable. They were actively attempting to undermine my happiness. Ignoring it was clearly ineffective, and every attempt to defend myself only seemed to fuel their drama. I realized the only way to proceed was to completely exclude them from the wedding. That decision was not easy, but it was essential. 2 days after the dinner, I sat down with Ryan and explained everything. "I think I need to uninvite them," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "They're just going to make things worse if they're there." Ryan immediately nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. It's unfortunate, but this is your day, our day, and you deserve to enjoy it without worrying about their next maneuver. Hearing his support made me feel a little better, but the prospect of actually disinviting my mother and sister from my wedding was daunting. It wasn't solely about them. It was about the potential ripple effect it might have on the rest of the family. Still, I knew I couldn't allow their detrimental behavior to overshadow everything Ryan and I had diligently planned. So, I composed an email. I kept it concise and factual. I explained that their actions over the past few months, spreading rumors, guilt-tripping me, and creating needless drama, had made it clear they were not supportive of my wedding. I informed them that their conduct had caused me significant distress, and for my own peace of mind, I had decided to uninvite them. I pressed send and immediately felt a burden lift from my shoulders. Within hours, the responses began to arrive. My mother was the first to reply, and let me tell you, it was quite a piece of work. She labeled me cold-hearted and accused me of tearing the family apart. Her email was filled with theatrical phrases like, "I never imagined my own daughter would betray me in this manner," and "You've chosen a man over your own flesh and blood." She even included a line about how my father would be disappointed in me if he were still alive. Classic guilt trip tactics. I did not reply. Next came Cassie. Her response was precisely what I anticipated, full of anger and self-pity. She accused me of being envious of her, still not sure what I'm supposed to be jealous of, and claimed I was punishing her for being candid about her feelings. She concluded her email with, "You'll regret this when you realize you've destroyed this family." I did not reply to her either. The repercussions did not cease there. Over the next few days, I began receiving calls and text messages from other family members, mostly those whom my mother and Cassie had already prejudiced against me. My uncle telephoned to tell me I was being childish and should simply let it go for the sake of family harmony. A cousin I barely communicate with left a voicemail saying, "I can't believe you would do something like this to your own mother." At first, I felt overwhelmed by the negative reaction, but then something wonderful occurred. The people who genuinely mattered began to stand by me. My father's sister, Aunt Laura, called me to express her pride in me for defending myself. "You've tolerated their nonsense for long enough," she said. "It's about time you put your foot down." My cousin Megan, who had been keeping me informed about Cassie's antics, sent me a lengthy text message saying, "Don't let them affect you. Everyone who truly knows you is on your side." Even my godmother, who is one of the most no-nonsense individuals I know, called to tell me I was making the right decision. "Your wedding should be about love and celebration, not drama and bitterness," she stated. Their support was like a balm for my soul. For the first time in weeks, I felt as though I wasn't alone in this struggle. But of course, my mother and Cassie were not going to relinquish their efforts quietly. Approximately a week after I sent the email, I received another call from Megan. "You're not going to believe this," she said, sounding both amused and irritated. "Cassie's telling people you uninvited her because you're threatened by her." I couldn't help but laugh. "Threatened by what, precisely?" "Apparently, she's been saying you're worried Ryan has feelings for her," Megan explained. "She claims he's been flirting with her, and you discovered it, so you're trying to eliminate her to save face." It was so preposterous, I didn't even know how to respond. We both knew there was absolutely no truth to anything she was saying. Still, it was infuriating that she was attempting to involve Ryan in her web of falsehoods. "That's just desperate," I remarked. "No one is going to believe that." "Honestly, most people don't," Megan concurred, "but you know how she is. She's going to keep fabricating the story until she finds someone gullible enough to side with her." I resolved not to expend any more energy worrying about Cassie's delusions. At this point, I was focused on preserving my peace and ensuring my wedding day proceeded flawlessly. To that end, Ryan and I sat down to review the guest list and finalize all the details. We contacted the venue to ensure they would support us in case Cassie or my mother attempted any disruptions. We also engaged a couple of security guards to maintain order, something I never imagined I'd have to do for my own wedding, but here we were. Through it all, Ryan was my steadfast support. He reminded me that this was our day, and we owed no one an explanation for safeguarding our happiness. By the time New Year's arrived, I felt as though I was finally regaining control. Cassie and my mother could spin their narratives all they wished, but they were not going to ruin this for me. Update 2. I know it hasn't been long since my last update, but what transpired is something I absolutely needed to share with you immediately. If you thought Cassie's antics couldn't worsen, prepare yourself, because this incident surpasses all previous ones. By the time January arrived, I believed I had witnessed every facet of her jealousy, pettiness, and outright manipulative behavior. But what she attempted next left me utterly astonished and, frankly, a little disgusted. It all began with a strange text message Ryan received one evening. We were sitting on the couch, finally relaxing after a stressful day of finalizing wedding details, when his phone vibrated. He glanced at it, and I noticed his expression immediately shift from relaxed to tense. What is it? I inquired, already bracing myself for drama. It's Cassie, he replied, showing me the message. The text read, Hey Ryan, I really need someone to talk to. I know you probably think I'm a terrible person right now, but I'm truly struggling, and I feel like you're the only one who understands. Can we meet up? At first, I didn't know how to react. I mean, on the surface, it seemed harmless enough. But knowing Cassie, and knowing how diligently she had been working to cause problems, I had a bad feeling. Ryan must have sensed it too, because he didn't reply right away. Instead, he turned to me and said, I don't like this. It feels off. Because it is off, I responded. She's never even liked you. Why would she suddenly want to discuss her feelings with you? We agreed it was best to ignore her, but the messages continued to arrive over the next few days. She sent Ryan a series of increasingly desperate texts. She spoke about how lonely she felt, how she had no one else to turn to, and how much she appreciated his kindness during such a difficult period. Let me remind you, Ryan had never had any kind of meaningful conversation with Cassie. He had always been polite to her, of course, but they were not close by any stretch of the imagination. So, this sudden outpouring of gratitude felt calculated. Ryan was as unnerved as I was, but we both decided it was better to wait and see what her ultimate goal was before responding. And sure enough, it didn't take long for her true intentions to become evident. Later, Ryan received another message, and this one was so blatant it made my blood boil. Cassie wrote, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I feel like we have a connection that Emily doesn't understand. I don't know what to do with these feelings. I was furious, not just at her for being so brazen, but also at the sheer disrespect of it all. She knew we were getting married in a matter of days, and here she was trying to insert herself between us with some cheap tricks. Ryan, bless him, immediately showed me the message and asked, How do you want to handle this? I took a deep breath and said, Let's not give her the satisfaction of a direct response. Block her number, but before you do, take screenshots of everything. He did exactly that, and we kept the screenshots as evidence, just in case she decided to try fabricating some wild story later. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to let this go unaddressed. I didn't respond to her directly. There was no point in engaging with someone so desperate for attention. But I did send an email to my mother and a few other close family members, outlining what had transpired. I kept it straightforward, attaching the screenshots and explaining that this was the proof that I was justified in uninviting Cassie from the wedding. This behavior is toxic and manipulative, I wrote. I've done everything I can to maintain peace, but this crosses a line, and I hope now you understand why I excluded her. The responses were varied. My mother, predictably, came to Cassie's defense. She claimed I must have misinterpreted her intentions and that I was exaggerating the situation. She even had the audacity to suggest that Ryan might have misread the messages. I can't believe you'd accuse your own sister of something so horrible, Mom wrote. Cassie's just going through a tough time, and you're making it all about you. I rolled my eyes so hard I nearly sprained something. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. But other family members were much more supportive. Megan, my cousin who had been in my corner from the start, called me immediately after reading the email. Are you serious? She exclaimed. I knew Cassie was problematic, but this is next level. Good for you for cutting her off. My father's sister, Aunt Laura, was just as outraged. You're absolutely right to keep her out of the wedding, she said. She's proven time and again that she doesn't respect you, and this just confirms it. Their support meant the world to me, but I'd be dishonest if I said it completely erased the hurt. Cassie's stunt wasn't just disrespectful, it was humiliating. It felt like she was trying to undermine everything Ryan and I had built together, and I couldn't comprehend why. Was it jealousy? Spite? Some twisted need for attention? Perhaps all of the above. Whatever her reasons, I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to succeed. With just a few days remaining until the wedding, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't allow Cassie or my mother to ruin this for me. I also made sure to reinforce security measures for the big day. I contacted the venue and briefed them on the situation, letting them know Cassie and my mother were explicitly uninvited. I even hired an additional security guard, just in case they decided to show up anyway. It felt a little extreme, but after everything they had attempted, I wasn't taking any chances. I now feel more prepared than ever to confront whatever nonsense they might try to throw my way. Cassie's underhanded tactics might have shaken me, but they didn't break me. If anything, they only strengthened my resolve to stand my ground and protect my peace. Update 3. Hello again. Let's hope this is the final time you hear about my family drama. Let me tell you, I thought I had prepared myself for every conceivable scenario leading up to my wedding. But nothing quite readies you for the moment when your own family attempts to sabotage the happiest day of your life. The morning of the wedding commenced beautifully. The venue appeared enchanting with all the flowers and decorations we had selected over the past year. The weather was ideal for our ceremony, and my bridesmaids kept me laughing and at ease while we got ready. Ryan and I had agreed to do a first look before the ceremony, so once I was dressed, I stepped outside to meet him in the garden. The instant I saw him standing there, looking every bit as nervous and excited as I felt, all the stress and drama dissipated. This was the moment I had been anticipating, and nothing else mattered. Or so I believed. Approximately 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I was back in the bridal suite making some final adjustments when my maid of honor, Amanda, rushed in. She looked flustered, which immediately triggered alarm bells. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Cassie and your mom are here." My stomach plummeted. "What? How?" "I thought security was handling it." "They're trying to get in," Amanda explained. "Security stopped them at the gate, but they're causing a huge scene." Of course they were. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "What are they saying?" Amanda hesitated, which indicated it wasn't good. "Your mom's crying and saying she just wants to see her daughter get married. Cassie's, well, she's screaming about how you're a horrible person and how you don't deserve this day." I felt my blood begin to boil. It wasn't enough for them to make the months leading up to the wedding a nightmare. They had to try to ruin the actual day too. "What do you want me to do?" Amanda inquired. "Nothing," I stated firmly. "Let security handle it. If we go out there, it's just going to give them what they want." Amanda nodded and departed to check in with the guards. Meanwhile, I sat down and attempted to collect myself. I could faintly hear my mother and Cassie in the distance, shouting and arguing with security, and it took every ounce of my willpower not to march out there and give them a piece of my mind. A few minutes later, Amanda returned with an update. "They're refusing to leave. The venue manager offered to call the police, but they're worried it'll cause an even bigger scene." I groaned. This was precisely why I had uninvited them in the first place. "Do you want me to tell Ryan?" Amanda asked. I shook my head. "No, he doesn't need this stress right now. Just make sure they don't get anywhere near the ceremony." Thankfully, security was on top of it. They managed to keep my mother and Cassie confined to the parking lot, and eventually, the venue staff arranged a ride service to take them away. But not before Cassie shouted loudly enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "You'll regret this, Emily. You'll regret cutting out your own family." Once they were gone, I took another deep breath and told myself to let it go. They were out of sight now, and I wasn't going to let them steal my joy. The ceremony itself was everything I had dreamed of and more. Standing up there with Ryan, surrounded by our closest friends and family, the supportive ones, at least, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. This was what truly mattered. Not the drama, not the bitterness, just this moment with the people who genuinely cared about us. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I began hearing snippets about what had transpired with my mother and Cassie. Apparently, they had been shouting accusations at the security guards, claiming I was brainwashed by Ryan and that the family would never forgive me for excluding them. A few guests even overheard them from the parking lot, which was embarrassing, but most people simply rolled their eyes and dismissed it. My father's sister, Aunt Laura, approached me during dinner and said, "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. They showed their true colors today, and everyone sees it now." That was a common sentiment throughout the night. Cousins, friends, even some of my mother's old acquaintances pulled me aside to tell me they were on my side. It felt like a collective realization. People finally understood how detrimental my mother and Cassie had been, and they were not tolerating it. The remainder of the evening was a blur of laughter, dancing, and pure joy. Ryan and I shared our first dance under twinkling lights. My maid of honor delivered a hilarious and heartfelt toast, and my father's best friend, who is practically an uncle to me, brought the house down with a story about how he once caught Ryan attempting to sneak out of a family barbecue with a plate of ribs. By the time the night concluded, I felt lighter than I had in months. Cassie and my mother had not prevailed. Their attempts to ruin the day had only emphasized the immense love and support Ryan and I received from the people who truly mattered. When I returned to the hotel that night, I checked my phone and saw a dozen missed calls and text messages from my mother. I didn't bother reading them. I was finished allowing her or Cassie to occupy space in my life. Cutting them out completely was one of the most challenging decisions I've ever had to make, but standing there with Ryan, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I knew it was the correct one. Thank you again for sharing your thoughts with me throughout this ordeal. I truly do appreciate it. I'll let you know if there's any post-wedding drama. Let's hope not. I'm so exhausted, haha. Update 4. Hey Reddit, you won't believe what happened about a week after the wedding. I received a call from my cousin Megan, who, as usual, was the first to deliver the family gossip. "You're not going to believe what just occurred," she said, sounding far more excited than concerned. I sighed. What now? Cassie and your mom had a massive argument, Megan revealed. Like an epic-level fight. And get this, your mom expelled her from the house. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? What happened? Megan was more than happy to provide the details. Apparently, after the wedding, Cassie had been sulking around my mother's house, brooding over the fact that her grand scheme to ruin my day had failed. According to Megan, she was blaming everyone. Me, Ryan, the security guards, even some random cousin who supposedly didn't try hard enough to stop me. The real explosion happened when she turned on my mother. Cassie accused her of not doing enough to prevent the wedding. She started screaming about how it was Mom's fault that I had gone through with it. That Mom should have been more forceful in convincing me to cancel. My mother, who has always indulged Cassie no matter how absurd she's been, finally reached her breaking point. Megan said Mom yelled back, telling Cassie she was weary of the drama and that she was an adult who needed to take responsibility for her own life. Cassie did not take that well. She apparently went on a full-blown tirade, accusing Mom of failing her as a parent and choosing me over her. It escalated to the point that Mom finally told her to pack her belongings and leave. When Megan recounted all this to me, I couldn't help but laugh, not because I found it humorous, but because of the sheer irony of it. After months of my mother defending Cassie and taking her side, it all came back to haunt her. She really kicked her out? I asked, still trying to process it. Yep, Megan confirmed. Cassie's staying with a friend for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if she comes crawling back in a few weeks. The entire situation felt like karma in action. In the end, their toxicity turned inward, and they ended up taking it out on each other. I wish I could say I felt bad for either of them, but honestly, I didn't. After everything they put me through, it felt like poetic justice. As for me, I'm done with both of them. I've blocked their numbers, muted them on social media, and made it clear to the rest of the family that I'm not interested in hearing about their latest antics. Ryan and I are focusing on beginning this new chapter of our lives together.